is first time to visit Korea. I'm sure they will visit Korea many times. Good morning, Prime Minister Olme르트. It's really an honor for me to hold a discussion meeting with you this morning. Israel and Korea have a lot in common. We are very small countries with a few natural resources, surrounded by political and military tension with our neighboring these countries. However, we are both full of very talented human resources and made a successful innovation powered by science and technology. So we are small but strong countries. Given the common backgrounds, I think we can develop further through closer collaboration between two countries. So in this context, I think this discussion meeting will be very meaningful. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity to discuss challenging issues with you this morning. And during this meeting, I would like to discuss several topics, including startup activation, innovation-led growth, fostering talents, and so on. So you are widely recognized in Korea as the one who created a startup boom in Israel. So what made you to decide to create this environment, and what role has the government played in the growth of the startups?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for providing me with this opportunity. Not only that I'm delighted to be in Korea, not only that I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak to different groups and address some of the ideas that we may share with people from here, but this is a particular and unusual opportunity to meet with you, the head of one of the most prestigious education of academic studies in your country, which I think carries a record of great achievements.
Thank you for
and a lot of success. I wish when I was younger that I could be admitted to study in your institution. Maybe I would have succeeded a lot more in my life.
You still have a chance.
Yeah, okay.
It's the age of life learning.
I may take you by your words and come here. If you will allow me, please, let me put some things in more realistic proportion.
Mm-hmm. Please.
Korea is not small and not weak. Mm-hmm. Okay? Korea is a country of 50 million people, which means that it is larger and bigger than many European countries.
Your population 8.5 million, right?
8.5.
Yeah, so we are about 7 times
larger
so
than
it's
Israel.
A medium size,
But you are also bigger than Belgium, and you are also
right.
bigger than Holland, and you are also bigger than Finland and Scandinavia, Sweden and Norway, and I think Austria and others. So you are not small, and you have a lot of reasons to be proud of your achievements. Okay. When I look at the achievements of Korea, I can only salute you for what you have done.
Thank you so much for your compliment.
This is my preliminary approach to Korea. I don't look at you as a sister small country like Israel is, but as a powerful, successful, ambitious, energetic, and country with a lot of success. And I think you should be proud of it. And we look up to you with great admiration. And many times say, we wish that we had what Korea has, not vice versa.
Right, right.
Now,
from my point of view, actually, I respect your countries.
Well,
in terms of population, it's much smaller than us, but you are one of the great innovation countries in the world.
we are doing relatively well in areas of specific dimension. And one must understand something. Israel really had no choice.
I see.
So, you know, a lot of the success that is attributed to Israel is a result of the fact that we had no choice. Now we are 8.5 million people.
Yes.
But when we started 70 years ago, we were 650,000 people.
I see.
We had hardly one automatic gun against armies of 8 different countries. That we had to defend ourselves. So and so on. So we had to, the necessity, the weakness, the total lack of resources forced Israel to look for extraordinary ways of solving our difficulties, and that's what created this curiosity to look for the impossible in order to try and create the kind of strength which was essential for Israel to be able to survive. So number two, I think it will be a great exaggeration to make me, you know, the father of the boom of high tech in Israel. In my time as minister in different positions and subsequently as prime minister, I definitely supported, encouraged, and subsidized and tried to inspire the growth of high-tech industries. I am in no way a father of it. I don't think that there is one person that can take the credit. The credit really should be given to the creative mind of the young Israelis.
You're very humble.
Oh, I'm trying to be honest about it. You know, I don't need to make myself more of what I am.
Right. I think I'd like to move to second questions. You know, so Israel has been called the heaven for startups. And it is said the number of Nasdaq-listed Israel company is more than all the European countries combined. So I think Israel has a very unique entrepreneurial atmosphere and ecosystem for successfully launching the startups. So can you tell us about that?
Yes, Israel, I think we have more Israeli companies listed in Nasdaq than any other country in the world except for America. I remember once I hosted a conference in Israel, and the guest, amongst others, was the chairman of the Nasdaq exchange. And I said that Israel is number 3 after America and Canada. So he raised his hand and he said, Mr. Minister, at that time I was minister or vice prime minister, he said, you should stay corrected. You are not number 3, you are number 2. You are ahead of Canada and ahead of any other country other than America. So I think this hasn't changed. Israel has many companies listed in Nasdaq. Now, why? The nature of the innovations that are created in Israel is not restricted to a particular piece of land or a particular way of life, you know, something that can be only expressed in the confinement of Israel. If this is true, it can be useful and helpful in Israel, in Korea, in Austria, in Canada, in Australia, or in Indonesia. So therefore, we could list the Israeli companies in NASDAQ or in the New York Stock Exchange because the appeal of this creation was everywhere. Just take the last example. The Israeli company Mobileye was recently bought by Intel for $15 billion. This company has developed the technology that leads to the autonomous cars. Okay? 3 years ago, it was listed in NASDAQ, and of course, it became overnight, it became a big hit, and it then was already traded for $8 billion. Then Intel decided to make an offer to all the shareholders and buy it for $15 billion. But why is it so popular? Because autonomous car can be used here and can be used in Japan and can be used in France. So it is not limited to a particular place. What makes the Israelis so keen about startups? What else do we have to do? We have no natural resources. We have no oil. Until 2-3 years ago, we didn't have even gas. We had to buy everything from overseas. We don't have copper. We don't have any other. We don't have bronze. We don't have any other diamonds. We have nothing. So, and also, because we are so small, Israel is not in itself a market. You know, in Korea you have 50 million people, so you produce cars, you know, you have 50 million people that can buy cars. It gives you a basis that it can be commercial-wise quite attractive. We don't have even the minimum necessary in order to make the Israeli products attractive in Israel. Now, textile industry, for instance, was very popular in Israel 50 years ago, 40 years ago. But can you compete with China? Can you compete with India? Can you compete with Malaysia or with Hong Kong or with Indonesia in the cost of labor? No way. So we have to look to do things that can be competitive in the markets in the world. And what are these things? These things are innovations that have no limit to a particular area.
Yeah, I think Mobileye is a great example for technology innovation.
Yes.
But it entered the right time in the right market. That's very important. Actually, that's connected to the next question because most of Korean startup has a big hurdle to be globalized. Okay, so I want to ask some, what kind of secret you have or recipes for success for Israel companies listing on the NASDAQ and growth as a global companies, in addition to the technology innovations. In Korea, it's many researchers create new technologies, but still we have a hard time to go to NASDAQ. So how is Israel go to NASDAQ in addition to the technology innovation?
Well, I think really the listing in NASDAQ is just the peak of a process which starts much earlier. And that's where you have to look at it. I think that the relevant question is, what makes the Israeli tick? What motivates a 22 years old Israeli to start something that maybe 5 years later, 7 years later, 10 years later will be listed on NASDAQ. But what is it that at the beginning that creates it?
What is that?
I think that this is, first of all, there is something about the spirit of this country, considering the general circumstances of Israel. The fact that we were traditionally encircled from all sides by our enemies, that we all grew up in a sense of some fear that we have to find ways to defend ourselves, the lack of resources, all this. And also, I think the army service. There is something about Israel's nature that I can call it restlessness. Restlessness. People are not, they don't live in the land 500 years, generation after generation after generation after generation, and they are settled in the place, and they are used to it, and they can look back and remember the father, the grandfather, the great-grandfather, the great-great-great-great-grandfathers. They don't have, everything is new, because we started the state only 70 years ago. Many of the Israelis, maybe close to 50% of the Israelis, were not born in Israel. They were born in other countries, and they immigrated to Israel only when they were 10, 15, 20, 30. So still everything is in creation, is in the mood. People come to a new country and they have to prove themselves, to establish themselves in order to be able to cope with the challenges where they live in a new place. So that adds to it. And then of course is the army service. Look, you take Israelis at the age of 18. So number one, what we try to do, and we do I think quite successfully by the way, we try to distinguish amongst all those who are eligible for recruitment to the army, everyone at the age of 18, they are tested to find what are their specific abilities.
So male and female?
Male and female are all the same, yes, no distinction, no distinction. We have female fighters, female combat pilots in the Israeli Air Force, flying the Israeli jets and doing it miraculously, successfully. By the way, naturally, I don't think that male are qualified better than women, females, to be great pilots. Now, we test them, and first of all, we distinguish amongst them the most talented for specific different areas of interest. We find those who are extremely qualified, let's say, for mathematics and computers. We find those who are extremely qualified for biology, for chemistry, for physics, and so on and so forth. And many of them are given the opportunity, instead of going through the ranks at the normal pace, they are allowed to join a special unit, the Talpiot unit, where they can study for in the university at a preliminary age, and many of them do it. And so when they are joining the army, they are already having the second degree.
But all the people not in the Talpio. Talpio is just for science gifted.
Yeah, for the Talpiot is for the highly talented people. But these highly talented people are that section of the population that they then succeed very much in the army, in the special units of the army, and subsequently when they leave the army, they are the first ones that establish the startups, and the startups that make the big boom of success that can break through and go into NASDAQ and be listed, and so on and so forth. Now, there are many others who are very good also, and the army provide them with an opportunity to excel even if they were not identified before to have exceptional talents. Why? Because what sometimes in other armies some people do at the age of 40, they are requested to do at the age of 20. I will always remember that we had very close cooperation with the American Army. And at the time that I was Prime Minister and George W. Bush was President of America, we decided to intensify dramatically the cooperation between the intelligence services of both countries, particularly vis-à-vis some threats that we faced and that for which we needed the best possible forces from all sides. So we worked together with America. And after a short while, I had a complaint coming to me from a very high source in the American government. They said, you know, we feel very uncomfortable when we meet with you people. I asked why. He said, from my side, there is a general at the age of 50, one-star general, two-star generals, and in front of me, his counterpart is 23 years old Israeli boy. You know, we feel uncomfortable. How come this boy, what does he think he knows, you know, against a one-star general at the age of 50? But it turns out that the 23 years old boy knows much more sometimes than the one-star general. So Israelis are given the opportunity at a very young age to assume enormous responsibility for major issues which Israel has to deal with, and that they are giving the chance to, number one, to research it, to deal with it, and to offer solutions, and their solutions are adopted, so they get a great deal of confidence in their ability to move on, and that's what encourages them and inspires them to come up with new ideas, with different things that eventually develop into a startup, and then on from a startup into a company, and from a company into a listing in the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange.
So connection during the military services, Talpio, not continued after military service, right? So
they are always connected to the army, even when they develop in the civil life companies which are doing things not necessarily related to the army. But many of them, by the way, Talpiot is just one part. There are many other sections in the army which recruit exceptionally gifted and outstandingly bright young people, and they are later become very successful in the various areas of creativity and technological development. And also, you have to understand, many Israelis who are as bright as the Talpiot guys, they want to be fighters. And the Talpiot guys are fighters with their mind. So they sit in the room and they have the planning and the concepts and the developments and so on. But there are many who are equally bright. They want to be fighters in the commando, in the paratroopers, in the Navy, in the Navy SEAL, you know, similar to what the Americans have, or in the Delta Force of Israel, which is as equally courageous and powerful as Delta. But when they finish their army service, they are just as equally capable and gifted to develop, you know, startups and new ideas, and they focus on this and succeed.
Yes.
So the numbers are much larger than just the number of Talpiot, which is a small unit.
Yeah, right.
And also, the most famous, I think, unit that has produced more innovations and more startups is the A200. The A200 unit is the signal intelligence unit of the Israeli army. The unit that has...
So what is the difference between the A200 army and Talpio?
Talpiot is a unit for those before they even recruited to the army. They go to study. A200 is the signal intelligence unit. They listening devices that when you speak in Korea, we don't do it. We are friends of Korea, we are not interested. But just to give you an example, that they can hook in to something that happens in the 10,000 kilometers from Israel, and see what they do and listens to what they speak, and can create to them all kinds of images that are not real, but which are leading them or misleading them into do all kinds of things and so on and so forth. So this is a highly professional, technical, exceptional unit, which is the symbol of Israel's technological success. And by the way, I think that graduates of A200, when they retired and started their startups, I think today, collectively, maybe they are worth, I mean, the net value asset is probably at least $75 billion. Okay? For instance, the famous guy that created Checkpoint. You know, Checkpoint is the most successful defensive cyber company in Israel, which is listed in the stock exchange in New York at $18 billion, right? So a guy at the age of 22 created it and made it into the colossus that it is, and many others. The Palo Alto company, which is, by the way, is traded in Palo Alto, yes, but it is a former partner of the guy that created Checkpoint. And they separated. He went to America, created Palo Alto, and Palo Alto is also traded for $18 billion. So, I mean, these guys, they all from A200.
I think it's a great idea for your country, the military period, is to cultivate the historical expertise. Then, because many people think that the military period is useless for to cultivate his career.
Look, I guess that people that serve in the army for 3 years, in most cases, could do some other things in those 3 years other than serving in the army. But because of the very special circumstances, and because of the fact that the Israelis are great lovers of their country, they love Israel. For them, Israel is a miracle. Even when they were born in Israel, it still is a miracle that we were always outnumbered. We were always much more poor than our neighbors. They were the wealthiest countries of the world, you know, with lots of oil, lots of money.
So this kind of patriotism is still working in the young generation?
It has inspired the young people. To this day, it inspires the young people, and they are very anxious to succeed and to protect their country and to find different ways of doing it with the limited means that we have, to use what we do have, which is unlimited, is the imagination of the mind, the free spirit of the mind, the ability to dream of things that never were and say, why actually don't we try to do it?
Well, let me move to the funding, because at the initial stage of a startup, the funding is very important. What kind of funding you get? So we know that Yojima funding from Yojima Group is very famous, and I understand that you are the one of the person to support this Yojima fund. Last year, actually, I have met the chairman of Yigal Eli of Yojima. You know him, I'm sure that you know him, and Yojima Group. So he told me that he supports 86 startup company which are listed on NASDAQ.
It's not him personally in the sense that it's not privately. He supported it as part of the chief scientist position, which is part of the Ministry of Industry and Trade. And the Yojima Fund, indeed, originally, not the Yojima Korea, which is a relatively new creation, which has adopted the legacy of the original Yojima. Originally, Yojima was created by the government in the early 90s, precisely for this purpose, that the government will provide funds for new startups. Not to everyone. Not everyone that comes and says, I have an idea, I need money, you get money, and so on. No. It is done in a very careful manner. People come, they say, we have a startup, an idea. It is checked by a group of experts of this particular area of interest. So there are many such scientists who are sitting in those committees, depending on the area: biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, algorithms, agriculture, water research, cyber, satellite, artificial intelligence, you name it, top experts on every such area, and they check these ideas, and only those ideas that are qualified by a very tough professional examination become qualified for a government grant. And the government grant is always the preliminary funding that give them the opportunity to stand on their feet at the very beginning, and also provide jobs for 3, 4, 5 young people. So what happens is that in an annual basis, you know, if you have 1,500 new startups, you have sometimes 10 or 15,000 new jobs for young people that retire the army and look for jobs, and they have this opportunity. So the funding of the government is a trigger for, you know, expansion of this phenomenon, and at the same time of creating jobs for many people, and also they raise the interest of the private sector. You know, a private entrepreneur looks at this company and at startup, and he says, well, if the government found out after an examination by top experts that this is worthwhile, you know, to support it, why we not do also what the government does? And they add their financial support, and so it develops. Now there is a whole big industry of venture capital that is supporting, and of course international venture capitals are part of it as well, because they made billions of dollars from investing in Israeli high startups. You know, Mobileye was supported also by international investors. Orbotech, which was sold this year for $3.5 billion, was supported by foreign investors. The Frutarome, which was sold for $7.1 billion, was also supported by foreign investors. So foreign investors think that investing in startups in Israel is worthwhile financially. They do it. Others come as well. And so it spread and spread and spread all the time. But it's true
so
that
the
Yozma of the government of Israel, at a time when Yigal Ehrlich was chief scientist, was one of the first triggers of moving it up. The other thing was a binational fund that we created with America at that time, 30 some years ago, which was at about the same time, which was called the Bird Foundation. The Bird Foundation, which we created with the United States of America, was one of the main triggers for the development of high-tech industries in the state of Israel.
I see. I think in the coming era of the fourth industrial revolution, I think startup is getting more important because now the company is rapidly changed, the technology and science are rapidly changed. In particular in Korea, actually in Korean economy, it's much rely on the few giant companies. And in terms of company, 0.05% of companies, giant companies, and that occupies about 62% of export volume. So if few giant companies collapsed, the whole Korean economy collapsed. In that context, the startup, boost of the startup in Korea is very, very important. So Israel government still, support the startup in the coming era of the first industrial revolution, and is there any national policy for that?
Look, I want to say something which is not necessarily an immediate answer to your question, but I think it gives you the necessary framework for the understanding of the process that we are talking about. I think, if I may suggest, you know, humbly, because I really think that you minimize the achievements of Korea for no good reason. You are a very successful country and very talented people, and I have enormous respect for your achievements. But what I want to say is one thing, which I think is of great significance. You have to create a spirit in your country, mostly in order to influence these young guys, that they can take a risk and they don't have to be afraid of failure.
That's a very good lesson.
That's very important.
That's a very important lesson.
You know what? The Israelis, partly because when they retire the army at the age of 23, they don't have anything anyway. They are not married yet. They don't have children. They don't have any property. They have nothing. So they say, what happens if we fail? We didn't have anything, we will not have anything. Not a big deal. So they are not afraid of taking risks. And taking risks and trying is the key to success. Many times you fail. But life is not only made of achievements. You fail first, you fail second time, third time you succeed. You have to try. You have to have the courage to try and to be fearless of failure. So you have to help create this atmosphere that people that fail in the first attempt, they are not lost. They don't have to feel lost, and they don't have to feel that they have no other chance in the future. On the contrary, if you will come up with a good idea, even if you failed once, we will still help you. I think you have to develop this atmosphere. This will encourage young people to do more than anything.
I think that's very important spirit, which we exactly need. In Korea, it's actually many young generation want to involve in the startup, but they are really afraid of failure, because in Korean society, once we are failures, you fail forever. So how we change this kind of atmosphere from the national point of view?
Keep helping them when they fail. Talk to them about.
So in your country, how you help them for failure?
They failed. They came again with a new idea, and I helped them. I say to them, I don't care what you failed in the past. It's your failure. It's my failure. I failed. Why? Because I thought that your idea is a good one. So I share with you the same misjudgment. So what? You have to be patient, and you have to look, further to the horizon rather than to the balance sheet of tomorrow morning. In this business, the balance sheet of tomorrow morning is not the criterion by which you judge the chances of building up a thriving industry that will develop into the future.
Well, I used to say to the young generation that I used to give an example of Edison. Actually, Edison had failed 2,000 times when he finally developed the light bulb. So he considered those failures as an asset for the success in the future.
That's right.
So that's very important to give a lesson to them. And also in the coming years, convergence is very important. Convergence cross-disciplinary combination. So in third generation third revolution or second revolution, first revolutions, discovery and invention mainly come from the specific areas. But in coming years is cross-disciplinary education and convergence among the physical system, biological system, cyber systems are very important. So most of the invention and discovery will become from this convergence. So what do you think about this convergence approach for the future?
Look, things that do not exist today will be the focus and center of life tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
What we have to do is to try and dream about things that do not exist today and see what will become interesting and inspiring and challenging in the next generation. For instance, had someone told you 5 years ago that the day will come that there will be blockchain technologies, you look and say, what is blockchain? Mm-hmm. Number two, they will tell you that there are cryptic currencies, virtual money. Mm-hmm. You will look at it and you will say, I mean, what the heck are you talking about? What is virtual money? Money is, a note, a banknote that I take from my wallet and I pay to you and you give me a product, right, in the store. No. Today, there are cryptic currencies, and there is an emerging technology of blockchain. And in 10 years' time, maybe, it will be dominant in our lives. So the question, how can we challenge the young boys and girls at the age of 22 to think of ways to deal with it now, so that by the time it will emerge more and more, your society, my society, others will be ready to deal with it. By the way, this is what I'm trying to do now with my partners from Yozma Korea, by creating a fund that they and us in Israel together will try and look into these areas. This can be artificial intelligence, this may be autonomous cars, this may be cryptic currencies, and all other things. And water, the sophisticated new technologies on water use, in order to be able to provide pure water everywhere in the world. We in Israel produce already 750 million cubic meter of pure water from the sea, from the Mediterranean. And we don't depend anymore on the rains, or we don't depend anymore on the Lake of Galilee, something that was essential for our economy for many, many years. So irrigation, computerized drip irrigation systems that can make a great impact on the development of agriculture, on the growth of food. All these things can be anticipated now for the next 5-10 years and can be cultivated and developed so that we will have a solution at a time when the need will be imminent.
Okay, you praised Korea's miraculous development of the last half century, but that is based on fast catch-up model, fast catch-up strategy. It's followed advanced technology in other countries, but we understand that we cannot go further. This is a fast follower strategy. So in that sense, the government now proclaiming that the innovation-led growth is one of the important axes for the government to further development in the coming years. So in this regard, what is your advice? What government can help the company for
invest more in R&D? Invest more in R&D and think not what are the merits of today, but what are the the deficiencies of tomorrow. For instance, we all praise for good reasons your car industry. Your car industry is miraculous. I drive Kia. My children drive Kia. My neighbors drive Hyundai.
What's your rationale to buy a Kia?
Pardon?
What is the reason to buy a Kia?
It's the best car. It's the best car and the least expensive car.
Okay. Yeah.
And it has everything.
Yeah.
It has climate control.
Yeah.
It has the best sound system. It has the best, most comfortable wheel.
The price is the best.
And you know, a product per money. It's the best. Hyundai is equal, by the way. Hyundai is equal. I like Kia, the shape of Kia. I like it more. My children buy Kia. My neighbors buy Hyundai. 31% of the Israelis, they drive Korean cars, okay? The Korean cars, as cars are made today, the Koreans are doing them better. But what will happen if in 5-10 years' time there will be autonomous cars? Are you now ready for this development with your research and development? Are you ready to be able to adjust your industry to the demands of the future so that you will keep pace with the most modern technologies that will emerge at that time? This is the question. Now you have to do it. In order to do it, you have to invest in R&D. The government has to encourage the investments in R&D in these areas, as well as in electronics, by the way. Samsung, you know, I remember the days when Sony was #1 in the world, and I visited Korea in 2005, and I visited Sony before, and then I visited Samsung, and I was escorted by maybe 200 business people. So I, at the end of the visit in Korea, I summoned all of them, and I wanted to hear what their reactions were. And everyone said this and that about, you know, Samsung, about Sony, about the products, about the television, you know, that high definition television, you know, and so on and so forth. I say to them, look at Samsung. In a short while, Samsung will be by far #1 in the world. They asked me why. Why do you say so? I say, I can see in the eyes of the Koreans that they are hungrier, that they have more passion, that they have more desire, that the Japanese are slightly tired. So take it now, look at Samsung, because this will be the future. Now I tell you, you guys be careful. Why? Because if Samsung or Korea will not be ahead of others in developing the electronics of tomorrow, tomorrow someone else will be ahead of you. And in order to develop it, you have to invest today in research and development with government subsidies, with government encouragement, with academic inspiration in your different institutes, particularly in yours.
That's a kind of message to Korean companies. So I want to remind that. Yeah, so you're talking about R&D investment important for innovation.
Absolutely.
Now, in terms of R&D investment per GDP, your country and our country is the highest in the world. It's about 4.2%.
Our is,
about
I think,
4.2, something like that.
I think that
Yeah,
ours is 4.6. Ours is the highest, but
highest, yeah, sometimes
but Korea is very close.
Yes, second. But anyway.
But it should be 10%.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Talk to our politician about.
No, I'm originally a politician.
Not your politician.
So that's why I say that.
Right. But you know, still, even though the ratio is high, absolute amount of R&D budget is quite small compared to the the leading country around the world. For instance, compared to USA, only about 10%. So question is how we effectively investigate, allocate this R&D budget to compete with the leading country around the world. That's a big issue in Korea actually. So what I'm asking to you is there a national policy to allocate R&D funding?
Look, it reminds me that in 2005, I made a statement that Israel spends the highest rate in R&D equal to another state, IBM. In other words, what Israel spends on R&D altogether, which is the highest rate against the Israeli GDP, is equal to what one big American company spends on R&D. But where is the difference? So you can say true, of course, if you take in absolute figures, you take a company like Apple, which is traded at the value of approximately, on these days, of $1 trillion, the highest ever value of any company in the history of mankind. So this is 3 times the GDP of the State of Israel. So naturally, only one company there can spend on R&D 3 times more than the State of Israel, and so on and so forth. But Apple, or IBM, or Oracle, or S&P, or Google, or Facebook, they spend most of their R&D in a very specific and narrow area of interest, which is their business.
No, I see. So they identify
and they don't
areas.
have the diversity that characterize the investments that a state can make, which is not tied up to one specific area of interest. And that's what happens in Israel. Therefore, maybe we spend less, but on the one hand, we spend on a variety of different things. And number 2, we create a spirit of competition, a spirit of ambition to achieve, and also incentives for young people to take the risk of doing things that may not succeed, but if succeed, they may change the world.
Okay. Well, it's for the innovation, creativity is very important, right? And Israelis are known as a very talented and creative people. According to statistics, number of the Nobel laureates in sciences by population is the highest in the world, your country. Okay. So I think there are some hidden education method to build up the creativity for young generation, at school or at home. So can you tell me about your education method?
Look, our education method has lots of weaknesses that we are trying to repair and to change and to improve. So I don't think that we should focus necessarily on our education system. The same spirit that creates the number of startups in Israel to be the largest in the world, the same produces subsequently the research which are focusing on some of the most important issues that interest the international community, and subsequently also they make that 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people that are winners of Nobel Prize. So I think basically there is not something in the academic education which is not reflected already in the early stages. And in the early stages, it's the same. It's the spirit of entrepreneurship, it's the spirit of taking risks, it's the spirit of competition, and it's the spirit of the need to succeed in order to save the state.
What I noticed from the Israel friends that they enjoy the debate and they enjoy discussion. So there is a joke that 2 Israelis have 3 opinions. You hold that joke?
This is when they don't have arguments. When they have arguments, they have many more than 3 opinions.
So, but in terms of discussion, actually, in Korea, we have to change the education system, because our education system is just a one-way teaching without any discussion. So at Kaist, I try to change our pedagogical system by adopting flipped classes. Are you familiar with the flipped classes? Flipped classes is based, composed of online learning and offline discussion. So in the class, we mainly manage the class with the discussion. So build up the critical thinking is very important for Korean students.
I remember that going back maybe 18 years or 15 years, when I visited Korea, I met with the mayor of Seoul then. I don't remember his name, I'm sorry, I apologize. And I talked to him about distant learning. I told him that there are Israeli companies which have developed very sophisticated technologies for distant learning, and that I want that these companies will be associated with the municipality of Seoul to try and offer Seoul technologies of distant learning. So distant learning is part of our lives already in Israel. I myself remember that as mayor of Jerusalem, maybe 20 years ago, I instructed the top guys in the education department to prepare our system for the day when the frontal teaching or the traditional frontal teaching will be much less common, and that mostly people will learn from their homes with computers and will only meet in the classes twice a week for social needs, not for learning. So I think it hasn't yet reached that stage, but it will come to this stage sooner than later. It is inevitable, because the truth of the matter, even today, I think that when I look at my grandchildren and I look at how much time they spend with their smartphone and with their iPads and with their tablets and with their laptops, they spend much more than they spend in their regular studies, and they learn much more from these by themselves, by their curiosity. So what you have to do, which is very important, is to raise an atmosphere of restlessness or intellectual restlessness and curiosity, to create all the time the feeling that there are things that you must learn about. Then, of course, they open Google, or they open the Korean Google, or they open others websites, and they study about it because it's all there anyway. But they have to have the curiosity, they have to have the urge, they have to have the restlessness, they have to have the impatience to know things and to know it rapidly and to study more and to focus more and to spend time more and to look more into the laptop, and then to come to the class and ask the teacher, that I don't understand, that I didn't, you read all about, tell me more, and so on and so forth. So it's a bilateral process of, creating this curiosity all the time.
Yeah, I feel passion from you. Well, entrepreneurship education is a very important university, right? It's these days, some countries like Sweden require the entrepreneurship education in the university, independent of the departments. At Kaist, also, we are going to implement entrepreneurship education. What I surprised from Israel is that Israel scientist, even though he or she majored basic science, he's very familiar with entrepreneurship. So one of the Israel scientists which I know is Professor Dan Shechtman.
Danny Shechtman, of course I know. He's a Nobel Prize laureate.
Chemist back to 2011. And I thought that he was purely chemist. But he mentioned to me, he has taught entrepreneurship education at the Technion more than 30 years, and many CEOs of startup in Israel took his class. So I was very surprised that, because that's a completely different atmosphere compared to in Korea. In Korea, my major was physics. But when I was a professor, if some professor involved in the startup, we thought that he's greedy for money. He's out of the ivory tower. So, but now it's changed. It's slowly changed. But how this kind of atmosphere has been built up in your country?
Again, I think out of the needs and the constraints and the fears and the lack of resources and the relatively small number of people, they had to somehow combine their forces in order to achieve the national goals. But I'll tell you, Professor, I'm ready to come and give a lesson in your university, in the Kaist University.
Yeah, I'm happy to invite you next time. Yeah.
So okay, so not
give
one lesson,
and big
like a semester.
for
I'm ready to become a semester, a professor for a semester.
Oh, semester?
Yes.
You want to stay one semester?
Yeah, why not?
Wonderful.
Why not?
You guarantee?
Why not?
Okay, great. That's a big gift to me. Okay, so I think the time is almost off. So this is the last questions, and so as I mentioned in the beginning, we have many common factors, and so I believe that Korea and Israel have many exciting opportunities for collaboration in the future. In which sector, in which way, do you think that two countries have the most synergy?
Look, you can buy from us what we produce. We can buy from you what you produce, which we do anyway. We buy your cars, we buy your electronics. We build ships in the dockyards in Samsung and in Hyundai. Some Israelis spent billions of dollars in building ships in Samsung and Hyundai dockyards, okay? And we buy Samsung. Samsung is the most popular electronic device in Israel. Different, smartphone, television, all types of televisions of Samsung are the most popular in Israel, and so on and so forth. This is what we buy from you, and you buy from us what you buy from us, which are, many innovations. What we can do together, we can do what I'm trying to do now with the Yozma Korea, to try and invest together in areas which are not yet discovered.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Take the risk. Take a giant step forward into the unknown, and make it a reality. Okay, that we can do together. Pardon?
Let me know unknown area.
I will let you know
Okay.
when our guys will find out what they have in mind that is unknown yet, that they want to look into. But then I'll teach it when I come to be a teacher at the senior school.
I think because as I mentioned that the Korea economy is much rely on the giant companies, and so we have a strong giant companies, and most of the company in your country is startups, they're small size. So there might be some synergy.
Some of our companies are big size, even by Euro standards. We have companies of $20 billion, of $15 billion, of $10 billion. They are not small. There are not too many companies in Korea which are more than 20 billion. Okay? So we have some considering the size of the state of Israel, but that's not the point. The big companies of Korea should spend much more money on research and development with other people from other countries in order to try and synergize the different interests and dynamics and energies and imagination and creativity to work together to look for solutions, because Samsung does not appeal to Korea only. Samsung is sold all over the world. Samsung is sold in Japan and in Israel and in Sweden and in Great Britain, in France, Germany, America, Canada, Australia, Malaysia, Indonesia. So you have to think together with people from these places in order to try and find something that may have escaped your mind but will not escape their mind, or vice versa.
Okay.
And work together.
Okay. So let me tell you one collaboration between our country, your country. Actually, Kaist has a collaborated Weizmann Institute. It's a Weizmann Institute, very strong in basic research. So Kaist is strong in applied research.
Ada Yonat, who is the Nobel Prize laureate in chemistry, is a good friend of mine.
Oh, I see.
Okay, she is from the Weizmann Institute.
Right, so it's a combination
Okay.
between two institutes might come out some the new discoveries in the future. Well, anyway, so time is up. So thank you so
much, Professor.
Yeah, I feel your patience and your ideas, your energies, and I think in terms of energy, you are much better than me.
You don't say that.
So
you don't say that. I wish I could be a dean of a university.
Yeah.
I never was.
Okay. So I hope to see you at our campus next time.
All right.